Dana, your story has been lighting up the airwaves and the camera for a couple of weeks now in Canada. I'm getting a huge flooding of people that want an update. What's going on?
Well, talking about getting our asses chapped. Well, welcome to Newfoundland. I feel like I'm lost in some type of weird twisted matrix out here. Like it's like a Dr. Seuss book gone bad. I'm assuming some of these followers have followed the story so far. We took 12 and change hundred people to the local police station as well as the RCMP station and filed a complaint for extortion. So we were really, really, really excited because it was based on law. We had done our homework. We had, tons and tons of statements flooding into the police station. And we thought we were making progress. So as it sits, this is very interesting because when we talk about extortion and we talk about paychecks, we have to acknowledge that not only are, oil workers and doctors being extorted for their position to give, censorship to information they can share or getting vaccinated to keep their employment. We also have to acknowledge that our law enforcement is also being extorted because their paychecks are also being cut by provincial and federal governments. So we opened up the two files symmetrically. The RNC, which is the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, which is our local municipal police force, were gung-ho. They were like digging in. They were requesting statements. They were kind of like fully interactive and could see from our perspective the extortion that was happening on the people. The RCMP, when we opened up their file, never ever responded back to anything. We didn't get. It was
this is already lighting me up, and I see Chuck's kind of twitching there already too. Two completely different police enforcement agencies, and you're right out of the chute. You were seeing two completely different responses.
Oh, like completely different. So the RNC requested that we provide them with statements to follow up with these 1,200 people. So we created a Word doc to make it simple, stupid. People could just click on it, fill in their information, and it would go right forward to the RNC. The RCMP wasn't really returning any of our messages. So the story gets really fascinating very shortly. So we were sending emails. Nobody was responsive. We had opened actually 3 files in Newfoundland, 3 different detachments with the RCMP. So in between this stuff happening, we filed a complaint on a Friday. The following week, our hospital had a cyber attack. Right? So it's really fascinating to me when we get into talking about how law works and the fact that we haven't got a sensible freedom of information request back that, gave us any clear indication that we were getting any form of evidence or actual feedback. The main brain of our health science complex was completely erased. So if we were to mobilize our police force or to request a freedom of information or any of those things, that was no longer going to be available to us. Wow. So that was fascinating. So the RCMP were set out to investigate. So the cyber attack happens on a Saturday. Nobody addresses it in Newfoundland till Monday. So from Saturday to Monday, they had no data, no ability to do blood work, no ability to do follow-ups on things. Treatments were being canceled. All of these things were happening. And on Monday, we get this really coy broadcast from our public that were saying we're being held by ransomware. Like, no offense, I live in Newfoundland. Most of the place think it's the last place that Jesus lived and, deemed it livable, right? I go to Florida and people think I live in an igloo. So why in the world would anybody want to hold Newfoundland's medical information for a cyber attack, right?
Yeah, of all the places on earth, that's kind of convenient, on the weekend where they need things to disappear that they get cyber attacked.
Yeah, and one of my complainants that I had listed in my statement to the RCMP was the digital minister, Sarah Studley, because she was the one that had infiltrated my Newfoundland business page and modified the people that were going to be under these mandates. So she's the one that umbrellas over the digital world of the hospital. So plot thickens. Dum dum dum. Are you ready? Because this is where it gets really interesting. I have a lot of friends right now because I've kind of turned into like the feeding zone of Newfoundland. When people want to share things but are afraid to share it themselves, they generally reach out to me. So I was reached out to somebody by management in the hospital that told me that if she could talk to me, but if she got caught talking to me about it, she would be fined upwards to $100,000 from her non-disclosure agreement with the hospital. So she went on to explain that said cyber attack happened through the vaccine passport portal.
Wow.
Bum, 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 right? So we're all going around with these little things in our phones, and they refuse to acknowledge, even still, that that's where the cyber attack came from.
So Chuck and I were just talking about this on a show on his station last night about how every bartender, every waiter, every door check, has access to your private medical information. Now, apparently, all you have to do is file an investigation and the whole world can have it too.
Right? Fascinating. It's really interesting because we didn't hear back from the RCMP, but a couple of days after this cyber attack was announced with our provincial health ministers, the RCMP released a on social media, okay? So we have 1,300 people that have filed criminal complaints. None of them have had the ability to give their statements. None of them are addressing the passports. I mean, I can send you the information. It was all about extortion and how people were, trying to keep their jobs. But they released on Facebook a message that said the RCMP are not investigating our health ministers because it's a matter of vaccine passports and human rights. I'm like, did they even read the file? Right? Like, how do you go from extortion, misrepresentation of fact, incitement of violence, genetic discrimination, to vaccine passports and a charter matter?
Chuck?
So we challenge them.
Chuck, you got to chime in here something, and some of this has got to be making your radar just go absolutely mental.
It reminds me very much of a piece I pushed out 2 days ago under the title, Why Saskatoon City Council Went from Seriously Considering to Mostly Rejecting a Very Divisive COVID-19 Bylaw. And a lot of what I found out just by following the news story spread out over 2 months was that the provincial government won't talk directly to the municipal government of Saskatoon. The municipal government of Saskatoon hates the provincial government of Saskatchewan. They talk to each other through the legacy news. They issue press releases to the CTV network and to CBC, and then they get 2 or 3 more days to react to what's going on. There was explicit instances in this story where somebody responded on Facebook, somebody else said, I don't know how the government could possibly do this. The municipal city councilor said, boy, you guys don't even listen to us. The provincial government press release person says, we don't even know who to call. And then in spite of all that's going on, the provincial bureaucrats and the municipal bureaucrats and the independent medical authorities all issue their own press releases. And they hope everybody else is understanding. And I think it's like the dumbest thing in the world. I don't understand why somebody at the municipal level or the provincial level won't call their counterparts at the other level of government and work out what's going on.
Well, this is just absolutely bizarre to me where, we've been doing a lot of work on law. And this has been where we're seeing groups across this country really embracing the law. The law is supposed to make us all equal. It's supposed to be the ultimate equalizer, right? We are all equal under the law. No one is exempt from the law. No one has an excuse from the law. Ignorance is no excuse from the law. But yet we have 2 different law enforcement agencies in the same province in our country that don't know which left hand and right hand from the law. Do our police officers even know the law anymore? That's my question. So, I mean, and you're right, Dana. This is what we're seeing. It's almost verbatim, and it doesn't matter whether it's of the constabulary, the police departments, or the corporations or the unions. It is the same response unanimously across the board. They immediately deflect from discussion about the law to human rights. Well, the fact about human rights is you're breaking the law. So when are we going to complete the circle and get back to the law, right? Because they just keep going to there, and then it's like the robot that's the record that's stuck.
Yeah, it's like a Where's Waldo world, you know, at some point in time, it's like you have to stop and go. Like I had a lady, I was trying to explain to her that, you know, most of the fines as a business person are not going to hold up in court, right? Realistically, they're not. It breaches the charter, and, you know, we all have the ability to work, and we have 2 provinces that have said that it's for behavioral modification, you know, not for, you know, public safety. And, you know, she said, I'm going non-compliant. And I said, no. You're not going non-compliant. Non-compliant means you're breaking the law. If you're standing behind the charter and you're standing behind your human rights, it is those people that are breaking the law. So you have a right equally to stand up for your rights as they do to enforce their extortion that's coming down from provincial and federal governments. I don't think it's non-compliance at all.
I'm starting to think the provincial and the federal governments don't really know what they're doing. They said for the longest while that they were trying to follow the science, but some very good Canadian political commentators, people like Jordan Peterson, have said that the people they've talked to within the various governments generally follow the polls. Science has got nothing to do with it. If somebody thinks they should pass another edict, they make another press release that goes out into the newspaper. The newspaper gets comments back about the edict, and then the government decides whether or not they're going to follow through with the edict. That seems to be how we're being governed right now. We're being governed through the newspapers, and we're being governed by polls and people running things up the flagpole to see what happens.
One of the most legendary scientists on Earth was the one that said, I believe, show me some science you need results for, and I'll, you know, and we'll find you the scientist that with the right paycheck will get you the results that you want. Dr. Patrick Moore was the first realized this is one of the original founders of Greenpeace that realized that science had absolutely nothing to do with things that are going on anymore. This is all about rejecting the science that doesn't fit the narrative. So it's all about he who holds the most money will get the scientific results that they choose, and our establishment rogue service corporations have decided who they've decided to pay and whose science they're going to follow, but they don't actually back it up with any actual science. And the sheer nature of science is to never stop questioning the science until it's politically unreliable. Then you're not allowed to question
I was taught that science without peer review is not science. It's simply belief. It's religion. It's not very scientific.
Well, this is, I think, what we're up against is you nailed it without getting religious, but this is a cult, and the cult is nothing more than an evil religion. I mean, it's that's what we're up against. They have no ability to free think or defend their stance. They have no science. They have no backing. Every legitimate attempt at debating the science has been utterly rejected. And anybody that even suggested debating the science has been persecuted and basically removed from society. We live in this digital avatar world where our social value is based on what people see on their devices, and once you're extricated from this digital space, you have no value to the world anymore.
Absolutely. And this absolutely reminds me about one of the stories that I would really like to push out next week. The story that you've been thinking about pushing out on your networks. It's about the people funding the unions. And this goes back to a while back where you were reporting on notices of liability being provided to Alberta government organizations, CN, Ontario government organizations, the police department, and we came across the absolute truth that the unions don't want to follow through with their normal role of protecting their members. And I think you were going to try and find out who's been funding the unions recently, and I never got that story. Can we talk about that story? I would really like to push that story out.
This has been one that's been developing because, and Chuck and I have been talking about this. I don't know if Dana, have you been keeping up to,
I've been following
to some of the others? Yeah, and we're hitting some of the tipping point of exposing some of the biggest crimes in human history. Trillions and trillions of dollars, nation-shattering, nation-destroying crime. And the unions are absolutely not just complicit, but they are necessary facilitators. And when you're talking willful knowledge, this is intent. Intent is the precedent that you need to prove in a court of law in order for some of these charges that exactly these investigations are going to uncover. So now this is where it all starts to tie together again. Now, Dana, to get back to what happened in what's been going on in Newfoundland, now there's more to this in what's happened in the last couple of days that you haven't gotten to yet. And this is where what Chuck and I were just ranting about ties into this, I believe. I really truly believe it does, because what happened to you guys, I think, was it Wednesday?
Which part was Wednesday? There's so much happening.
You went in, and did they not shut you guys down?
Yeah. So the RC MP had shut us down on Facebook. So what I did then is, since they messaged us on Facebook and told 1,200 people that they weren't even going to listen to their complaints, I called them back out on social media. I said, you can't dismiss 1,300 people. How can you say what they're complaining about if you haven't even read their complaints? So we didn't get a response from them. Yeah. So
these are criminal victims.
Yeah, they didn't even. They were like, you can just tell people to not start sending them. So I requested a public meeting. I said, I would like for you to explain the law to us, right? If we don't have grounds for extortion, or we don't have grounds for assault, or we don't have grounds for anything that we're saying, then if you don't want us to be a bother, then give us an officer or a sergeant to sit down and explain to us. So they haven't responded to it yet. So we're all going to go visit them at some point in time in the next little while.
So let me get this straight. They didn't send the police out. They didn't arrest anybody. They issued a press release on social media. And you responded to that press release on social media, and they've broke for the weekend. They'll be back on Monday, and they may or may not respond to you.
Exactly.
That's government today.
They're going to try to avoid having a conversation about it, because we do stand with the law. Like we've done our homework. We have credible evidence, and we kind of knew that they were going to stand us down, right? We had a feeling, especially after the cyber attack, because everybody in Newfoundland was going suspicious, right? So they were like, okay, we got to shut this down before it gets any further. So we have so much support here. We have in Newfoundland, one of the former premiers. We kind of have a dueling of the premiers right now, a former premier and a current premier. So I don't know if you guys
kind of like the Americans with their presidents.
Yes, except for I got the good one. I got the good president, the honest president. So are you guys familiar with who Brian Peckford is?
I know vaguely who he is.
Okay, so Brian Peckford is a former premier of Newfoundland, and he's the last living architect of the charter.
Oh, wow.
He's the last living person that had input on the charter. So he had put out to every premier across the country that he expected them to put it in front of a judge to perform a charter challenge, right? Take it, put it before a judge, see if it holds up against the charter, and then you can proceed, because he knows it's wrong.
Okay.
So out of all the provinces that he sent it to, nobody got back to him except for one. And that was Newfoundland. And Newfoundland's response was, I'm not going to give you an answer, and you're not allowed to talk about it.
Ouch.
Right?
So why wasn't he allowed to talk about it?
Well, he just basically said, no, you don't have, you don't have my permission to talk about it, but we're not going to give you an answer. So,
Wow.
I've had the personal opportunity because I'm working with Brian, on helping us some things out here in Newfoundland. And Brian's ass was chapped. And I'm telling you right now, that's not a man that you like to chat on, because if I give him double talk, he calls me a bureaucrat and gives me a whole pile of shit. So I was like, oh boy. So a couple of days later, he sent me a link to a blog where he said like, hey, I'm going to talk about this. Right.
Yeah.
So now he's pissed off as a beehive, and he calls me just like, well, what's happening down there now? And I'm like, okay, well, sweat and bullets. I'm like, I'm glad you're not my premier that we have now, because the one we have now is far more of a pussy. So, and I just said that in front of a whole pile of people, but we'll just leave that there. So he hooked us up with the Justice Center in Ontario. Okay. He pulled some favors for us, and we have another trick up our pocket. Let's put it in, and it's probably a better opportunity than even using the police force. So we're up to our neck in paperwork here in Newfoundland, getting everything ready to rock and roll again. And we're going to ride this one out and see how far we get. I mean, you have to be relentless with this stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I would suggest that talking about lawyers and their responses to what's happening over the last 18 or 19 months is also a really legitimate story to tell, because most of us haven't dealt with lawyers before. I'm familiar with a number of people who pushed legal challenges through. They couldn't find a lawyer. They did it themselves, almost by accident. Some of them did it right. Some of them did it wrong. And that reminds me of another story that I would like to talk about this week. Rocco Galati, who's sort of been at the center of this entire situation for the last 18 months. I don't know if he's won any court cases, but he's raised a lot of money, and he's done a lot of stuff. I'd like to be able to talk to him and find out what his plans are. I know he sued somebody. He sued another independent blog, Kenneth Law, about 3 or 4 months back, and I'm not even sure if that's gone anywhere. So
it's the interesting thing that I'm seeing right now, especially in the last week, is in my inbox, I've had half a dozen lawyers reach out to me, legal aids, all different kinds of people within the legal establishment, and I'm seeing this happening more and more and more across the country. I think we're getting to a point in where this whole narrative is going that it's time for this discussion to be on everybody's lips.
Yes.
We're done with the debate. Everybody is absolutely hung over to the max, the worst wasted they've ever been, and the worst white girl wasted they've ever been. They are COVID done, and we want answers. People want investigations. Nobody is screaming for violence or heads to roll, but there's enough of the malarkey, the lip service. And this, I kind of feel bad for this politician a couple of weeks ago, but I threw her under the bus for lip service when they said, as you said, Chuck, they don't know where they're going. And she had the nerve to stand there in front of a room full of 500 people and say, oh, keep emailing because these guys are just like you. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what's coming. And I said to her, I said, how dare you?
That's scary.
As an elected leader, tell these people, do you realize what you've done? You've told them that they have no leadership. You guys are absolutely clueless. So then we have no choice as the people then to take it down to foundational basics, and that means the letter of the law, which eliminates all of the debate, all of the discussion, and this is where we've been working so hard to bring the conversation to the things that eliminate all of the garbage, all of the labels. And I think we're getting a higher level of discussion. We are bringing out lawyers to the table. We are asking the harder questions. The independent media is asking harder questions, even from all sides. And this is how we have democracy. What we're doing here right now, holding our own people to account in discussion, in public, meaningful discussion. We have to do that, and we have to get used to being okay with that on all sides of the fence.
I don't know if we necessarily have to be okay with it, but you just said that lawyers are coming to you. They're asking how they can be of help. And 2 weeks back, one of the people I work with, Angela Argentina, she did an interview with a lawyer, a guy named Kania Singh, who went out in public, said there's a lot of money to be made here. We should sue the bastards who are firing us for not having vax passports. That to me is optimistic, and I would like to tell more stories about that.
Well, tell me if you're not getting more attention from this side of the spectrum of discussion, Dana. I mean, are you not hearing? I know you have. You've heard from Morocco, even. You're hearing from constitutional lawyers. You're hearing from people from the whole spectrum of these things. I think we're finally at a point in the discussion where we can be optimistic about these kinds of things, because now there is going to be a clamoring, exactly as you said, Chuck. And this is something that I've been telling the lawyers, any lawyer that I've spoken to for the last month. I said, if you want to have an illustrious career, make the choice and stand on this side of history right now, and you will have your cup overflowing for the rest of your days in your career.
I'm more practical than that. I talk about a massive untapped revenue source developing a new practice area.
Well, I mean, you're bringing it down to the bottom line of this. And this is something that we knew and we saw coming when we broke the New South Wales story. What was that, 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
Yeah. So the writing was on the wall when we started looking around the world. This is absolutely where it is going. This insanity, as I have said from the beginning, insanity is unsustainable. All we had to do is keep dragging our heels and fighting back and taking back our power. And this is now the most exciting time that I have had in years. Even this just discussion every day is more and more exciting. Yesterday on your show there, Chuck, you asked me how it was going. I said, living the dream, because I'm actually living the dream, because we've been fighting so hard with no victories that we see the tide turning. And this is the dream of every freedom-loving soul in this country. And now that we are getting the discussion back to things that matter, like law and order, and at the end of the day, that's what every group is searching for, answers, law and order. This is what we can finally bring we the people together with, giving them their power, which is the law, which absolutely unequivocally stands for them. Now we just got to figure out how to use it again. We're like kids with a brand new toy box full of tools, right? Go fix the car. Well, we didn't have a mechanic to teach us how to fix a car, but we're figuring it out.
Dana, you mentioned earlier you're getting so many things in your inbox, so many things that you're supposed to talk about, so many things you're supposed to help out with. Is it exhausting? I notice your hair. There's
lots of things. I'm all excited. So talk about money and inspiring lawyers. So we've had a problem here retaining counsel in Newfoundland. I've heard that most of the major firms across the country have been given retainers from their provincial governments to be a conflict of interest. That may or may not be true.
To not represent the opposition.
Yes, that's the rumor on the street, right? Yeah. That's the rumor on the street. We did hit a couple of people that said it was a conflict of interest. But, nothing breaks the dogs out more than if there's a bone, right? And there's some money to be found, like you guys said. They're incentivized. So since the vaccine passport scandal, the top savage, his name is Bob Buckingham, has now launched a class action lawsuit against our provincial government for the privacy breaches in the vaccine passports. That's going to be interesting to follow, right? Because it's the whole entire province. So that's like 500,000 people that have had their privacy breached. Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's above the fold in traditional media.
Well, as more of this,
at least it should be.
As more of this evidence comes out and more of this comes to light, I think they are forcing doors open that they are going to wish we did not even know about. Things like judicial reviews, things like the law societies. There are avenues of recourse with these entities. These people have been hiding behind the curtains a long time as well. And you, Dana, you guys called out the health authority there too, which is basically the people behind the curtains, the bureaucrats that pull the strings on all of the puppets underneath. Well, that's the same entity or the same equivalent within the legal system. The judiciary are the law societies, and they so far have not had even the remotest point of light poked at them here yet. But as you mentioned, the conflict of interest issue across Canada, this is again one of those things that we are seeing repeated over and over and over and over again, every single province. So now there's no such thing as coincidence to a journalist or to anybody with a free-thinking mind. Once in a lifetime there might be a coincidence, but now we're seeing police responses from all different enforcement branches, exactly the same across the country. Across the country, we are seeing unions, employers, and everybody with the same responses across the country, exactly the same across the country. Law firms, the same response. All of these things now start to open the door to things like demands for judicial reviews, demands from law societies. These are cans of worms we haven't even begun to open up, but we will.
And these are great. You go, Dana. Sorry.
Well, and people are afraid, they're afraid to talk about law because, well, you're not a lawyer or you're not a doctor. Well, no offense, you can read, right? Most people out there can read. I don't have to be a doctor. The doctor does the review. All I got to do is know how to find it on the internet and read it myself. And, another thing I think people need to think about is that, the law doesn't work one way. Just because it comes down from a position of authority, it doesn't mean that it's absolute, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't work for you. It's, I encourage every citizen out there to read the bill and the Charter of Rights and get familiar with criminal code, because if you can look at it and you're like, well, that's a crime, and that's a crime, and that's a crime. Just because I don't have a police force doesn't mean that I can't do it. And you know what? Even if the police force doesn't cooperate, there is a way to circumvent that.
Exactly.
There is a way that you can bypass the police to have, your own ability to bring these matters before a judge. Then you're putting yourself in the game, and it doesn't require a lot of skill. I mean, the criminal code is written there. All you have to go is this is the crime, this is the evidence, this is the crime, this is the evidence. You make a nice cover page with some names and addresses on it, and you go, hello, justice of the peace, here's my information. I'm a victim of a crime. I want to lay my own charges, and off you go. Anybody in this country can stand up for themselves, but we have to acknowledge first that we're equal, that they put their pants on like we do.
Absolutely correct. A friend a long time ago told me that lawyers do much the same as we do. They parse words. They deal in questions of common sense. The only thing a lawyer really needs a lot of practice in learning how to do, and that's why lawyers go to school for 4 years, 3 years, and then the article. The only one thing that a lawyer knows how to do at the end of law school that we don't know how to do yet is to say $1,200 an hour.
Right.
Pretty much.
This is true.
You touched on so many different things there, and what we're seeing happening real time. We started out going on a boots on the ground, underground teaching tour, I guess, for lack of a better word for it. It really wasn't planned, organized, or structured. It wasn't, like Tony Robbins doing a book selling tour or anything like that. We just went out and started talking to people and providing them with the law. Yeah. That's it. We just provided them with the law. And here's what happens when people are armed with the law. All of a sudden, they stop losing the arguments. They stop losing the debates, because the people that are coming at them, all they have is a narrative that is fed to them, spoon-fed to them. And once you dismiss 3 or 4 items that they have been spoon-fed, they have nothing left to argue with you. And then they're starting to look at, wait a second, how do you know all of this? And this is what we are seeing happening. There's an underground fire going on across Canada where this is exactly what's happening, community by community. And once people start to understand that the law is there for them, all they have to do is know it and use it. And they are community by community. I think in BC, they've shut down 6 different school board mandates in the last couple of weeks, right? The victories are starting to stack up because some people just simply know the law. at some point here, these lawyers and these politicians and these racketeering criminals, they see this as coming, and we are starting to see a huge shift. And like you said, a dog with a bone, there's nothing that a lawyer can sniff up faster than money. So I think that this is exactly why we are seeing such a turnaround in the attitude of lawyers. And I think that's the trend that's absolutely going to continue. We're getting blasted with people with questions about whistleblower laws, these kinds of things.
The whistleblower story last week was really wonderful. Thank you for suggesting it.
Well, this was something that need is the mother of all invention, right?
Yes.
And this was something that we know we don't know what we don't know, and sometimes we don't know what we need to know. I didn't know that journalists needed to know more about high level whistleblowing stuff. So we have, it wasn't that a story came to us. This was something that was born out of necessity. I called you up, Chuck, and I said, Chuck, we need to know more about this because this is getting serious, and the crimes that these people are exposing are getting serious. And we're getting back to where we kind of started out at the beginning of the show here with some of the biggest crimes in human history, with the racketeering that is starting to be uncovered. Dr. Martin and his magic bow tie. Oh my gosh, if I ever had a man crush on another human being, he is the guy right now.
That was the video he pushed out from the conference just a couple of days ago. He named some really serious names. He good corporate names that we can now track and follow and validate independently, hold them to account by law, by corporate law. It's a wonderful world we live in.
It's mind-blowing to me how far out from under the carpet this is, and we're still seeing people pretending to play stupid, police pretending to play stupid.
I have a question. Seems we're here because if I'm not educated on something, which I'm not educated on lots of things, because that's why I like to be a critical thinker, is there a way that people can get rid of their politicians? Like, no offense, but they're supposed to be public servants, right?
Yes.
This is the whole concept, is that we elect them to do our housekeeping on our political matters, right? How can we can't fire our servants?
They have strong unions. They have strong, well-funded through foreign mechanisms unions.
The problem was in 1992, they gifted themselves a get out of jail free card. It was called the Little Child case. And you give people go look this up. Right, and this is exactly it, where a precedent was set that there is no method or mechanism of accountability for an elected official except for to replace him with a newly elected official. So, people, it is really just that simple. Understand a couple of things. This is top-down foreign agenda with bottom-up implementation. You are the slaves doing the bidding of foreign corrupted rogue service corporations that are making you guys break the law. Just stop. Tell your small group of local Gestapo servants, because that's what they are. They are either accomplice or they are read in or taking part in what is going on. And if they hold out too much longer following this line, we're going to be able to prove that they were knowledgeable and their intent was there.
You don't understand, Wayne. I want to go along with the New World Order because I mean they'll come for me last then.
We're right.
I think we might be in line first.
What?
I said we might be in line first. I did something really cool yesterday, just to take off the topic of politics. If you want to hear something really interesting.
Yes.
Because politics is good, but people is important too. So, just to get into what these mandates and stuff actually mean to people is yesterday was Remembrance Day. And normally here in Newfoundland, they have gatherings and stuff at the memorial sites. But we had like 4 degrees, rain and sleet, right? It wasn't very nice. And we have this really sweet woman who's 99 years old, and she's a war veteran from World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So she couldn't actually attend because they moved it inside of a church, and she didn't have a vax pass.
Oh dear.
Now, talk about corruption, and tying in corruption with that is our churches. We've got the legal documents that show that our churches were incentivized by the provincial government to implement the vax pass. What a sad story that is, when your government prevents a war vet that created our freedoms that we have in the province, and incentivized the church to separate faith from its people. What do you think of that?
I think I used to work for a church up until 3 weeks ago when they fired me for not being double vaxxed.
Did they really?
Yeah. I actually got on the Laura Lynn Thompson Tyler show a week or so ago, and I got to talk about it. But I had worked at a church. I had also done Freedom Forum. It didn't allow me a lot of time to sleep, but I did both jobs over a period of years and years and years. And they finally, they fired me without cause. I've consulted a lawyer. I refused to sign up I refused to sign up on any documents. And I'm told I have a really good case, because all the documents they wanted me to sign essentially said I wasn't going to say anything bad about them. But, you know, now I can say they're crap. I mean, you know.
Well, and this was what their prime indicator that they knew what they were doing and asking was wrong, when they're asking you to sign non-disclosures. Who's the good guy when they're forcing you to under threat, under duress, to sign your silence away? This is just that's just never going to end well. But I wanted to address this with the churches, because people really have been again had something stolen from them in Canada, and that, I believe, is their faith. I started to deal with, the first time in my life a couple of years ago, with street preachers, and I was fascinated by what would drive these pastors to the streets to be street preachers. And then I got to see a letter while I was sitting at Pastor Arthur Pulowski's house having dinner with his family one day, that they had received 18 years ago at that time. So this would be 19 years ago. They had received this letter from the government telling them if they did not submit to the rules that they had decreed for what they were allowed to preach in their church, they would have their non-charitable status revoked, and they would not be able to run an organized church if they did not comply to the provincial government. 20 years ago, people. So people should not be shocked by these corporations, because the church has become corporations, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah.
I'm a deeply faithful man, but I do not believe that we find our faith in these corporations that as they've become. And at the end of the day, we are seeing all of the good separate itself through all of this. So this, to me, I believe, is one of the most enlightening times in human history, because we've been under this satanic lullaby for generations. But it is exposing even the church in all of this, that money is the root. The desire for money is the root of all evil. These guys desire the money more than they desire what is right.
I would argue that there is a 10% of the churches in Canada, primarily Lutheran, primarily Calvinistic. Pastor Art is one of them. Henry Hildebrand in Manitoba, Pastor Coates, or Henry Hildebrand's in Ontario. Pastor Coates, a couple of others. There's about 100 of them altogether.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But they're doubling in size over the last year. Every last one of them.
Yeah.
And the legacy churches are dying.
Yep. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we got down to about 6 or 7 minutes here. What's going on? We'll start with you, Dana, too. What's coming up this coming week? What's happening? What are you looking forward to? What's cooking on the books that you can tell us about? And what can people do to help or get involved, take part? Go.
Well, okay. We got 6 minutes. So we have Raven chapters across the country. We have PEI, Ontario, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Ontario, and Alberta right now. So we did a big Zoom meeting last night about this big step that we're going to be taking. I can't tell you what it is, because if we tip them off, the corruption will be able to have a chance to erode our idea.
Oh, I love it. So, we've got to leave them wanting more.
Well, there's no choice, right? We can't do that. So I had a
Absolutely.
big Zoom meeting last night, and I mobilized all those provinces to do something once again, which will be a first for, you know, this type of thing to happen in our country, to take a stand against this government tyranny. So I'm up to my neck in paper and research with my team across the country. And I'm hoping that by midweek next week, I'll have something pretty exciting to share with everybody. So that's what I've got going on, one thing at a time, right?
Sounds like you might have to come back next Friday night.
Oh, if I'm
putting it out there to
successful,
the universe.
we're very, very excited. You know, we've got a lot of really good support. You know, Brian Peckford's been great. The Justice Center's been great. You know, you guys have been great with helping provide us with additional information and stuff like that. You know, there's always going to be a crack. All we need is a crack. That's it. Because when water swells, when it freezes, it breaks things wide open. We're on the doorsteps of winter, and it's a perfect time to crack that shit wide open, right? So that's what we're doing this week.
Couldn't agree more. Chuck.
Oh, God. I want to do a piece on either Ezra Health or some of the other alternative healthcare facilities that are growing up across Canada, where unvaxxed and very competent doctors and nurses and healthcare workers can deal with people who don't care whether or not you're vaccinated, people who want the best healthcare possible. We've got part 2 of our COVID symbolism piece. It's a 4-part piece coming out. Rosemary Free is doing some stories on the growing death rates in Europe and in Israel, places where they're on their 3rd or their 4th booster shot. I think I mentioned Rocco Galati. I think that's it. I probably got 7 or 8 more on top of that. I'm hoping to push them all out. But I'm hoping 1 or 2 stories come from you as well. And I'm hoping 1 or 2 stories come from Dana as well. Again, my focus these days is on building out a distribution network. In the old days, a circulation manager was the most important job in a newspaper. And I think social media distribution is really important for online news.
So at that website listed right there, people can volunteer, sign up, intern, get a job. It probably pays in only goodwill for the time being, but you guys have got stuff going on.
Absolutely. Go to that page, look for the link that says we're looking for smart people who do things, who can write for us, who can distribute content for us, who can just sort of sit there and hold our heads when, especially my head, when it starts to explode with all the information. We have an open meeting every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Email me at freedomforumcanada.com or at chuck.black@protonmail.com, and we will get you into the Sunday meeting, and you'll get some sense of what we do. You'll get to pitch some ideas, and we'll have a little bit of fun, and maybe we'll get some good content out of it.
That's really awesome. And a couple of things to kind of tie off on some of who I wanted to give you guys' platforms and what you guys were doing a lot of time here today, but I also wanted to tie it in together, that the collaborative work that we were able to do, and some of the difference that it's making in the universe of things, in the universe of the fight. As we help each other, we get stronger. And what we do over at Ethics Over Fear is been able to really help facilitate a lot more information, a lot more connectivity. We've been helping Dana with information, Chuck with stories and information, and we're looking at what's coming down the board. And the team over at Ethics Over Fear, I think, is to me one of the most gifted things that I've ever had the opportunity to deal with, because the level of talent, the level of conviction and commitment and skill sets that is so abundant over there with people that are doing all of this for the right reasons is really making a difference. We're about to launch, stay tuned over the next couple of days, guys, investigations branches within each province, because there's a lot of crime going on. And we're not lawyers, but damn, we were really good at uncovering crime, right? I mean, who better than us right now to help people put together the nuts and bolts, the pieces, the stories, the truth, to continue with making this public knowledge. And so collectively we work in our fields, doing our things in our places, our communities, doing, you know, spreading the truth there, but it has a bigger impact. And for those out there that are paying attention to what we're doing, Ethics Over Fear, first public announcement, has been invited to sit on the steering committee for the legal and ethics department for the World Health Council. So what we are doing is impacting mindset and stuff, and that message is going to carry to the world. I tell the audience here all the time, guys, the world is watching. They are literally watching, and what you're doing now is influencing the world. So on that note, I want to thank you guys for coming and hanging out with me on a Friday night when you could have had a date or something, or, you know, like a real life.
I don't have a real life.
I've given up on that.
But you know, this is. But you know, in genuine honesty, guys, this is, we are making Canada again. That's been my closing line for like forever. Together we will make Canada again. And over at Ethics Over Fear, we look at it a little bit differently. We take that a step further, and we're building a future together, right? Rebuilding a future together. And this is what it's going to take: a whole lot more brilliant, beautiful people just like you guys, doing what it takes, doing what's right, not what's easy. And I'm very grateful on behalf of our audience that you guys took the time to hang out with us here tonight. And I hope you all had enough fun to come back and do it again. We'll let the audience decide how that's going to go. So share the shit out of this, guys. If you found value, share it. If you find value in the work that we're doing, when we're speaking to the business people, the big time people out there that are taking part now, we tell them generally, if there's two things: if you can't take part, boots on the ground, but you want to take part, whether it's financially or digitally, work, whatever, there's a place for you. You are not alone. Get involved, take part. If you want to change, take action. It's real simple. And if you have the ability to help people, help in litigation or independent media, because when all of this comes down, guys, we're it. So you might as well get used to working with us now, right?
and I can't think of a better crowd of intelligent, honorable, and brave people to hang with.
Oh, you're killing me, Chuck.
I'm trying to be cheerful. I mean, Wayne's right. I didn't get a date tonight.
Well, for a dateless Friday, I've had a pretty good time for a dateless Friday.
I got two good-looking men to hang out with. So
now I'm envious. I'm envious. I'm going to watch bad TV.
How am I supposed to turn this off now? All right, guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us here tonight. The rest of Canada, stay Canadian, keep fighting. Together we can and we will make Canada again. God bless, stay strong.
There's been a lot of